I need you to understand something before this story starts. I need you to understand that what you are about to watch is not a soft little romance about a man who buys flowers and writes poems and knows how to say the right thing at the right time. No, this is a story about a man who expressed his feelings by reassigning people's entire job positions. A man who once made a senior executive cry, not by yelling, not by threatening, just by looking at him. A man who had not smiled in what his employees privately estimated was somewhere between 8 months and 3 years, and nobody could agree on the exact number because nobody had been brave enough to track it closely. This is a story about Baek Ryujin, and the woman from Brooklyn who walked into his building, smiled at the security guard on her very first morning, and accidentally, completely accidentally, changed everything. If this story does something to you, and I believe with my whole heart that it will, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Now let's go. Her name was Chloe Danvers, 26 years old. Born and raised in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, in a third-floor apartment above a West Indian bakery that her grandmother had owned for 30 years. She had grown up with the smell of coconut bread in her clothes and the sound of old soul music coming through the walls on Sunday mornings. She had grown up with a grandmother who told her every single day that a woman who knows her own worth does not need to shout, she simply walks into a room and lets the room adjust. She had grown up learning that the world had opinions about women who looked like her, and she had spent 26 years deciding, calmly and daily, that those opinions were other people's problems. She was the kind of woman who kept a planner and actually used it, who had a whole system for her notes, color-coded, cross-referenced, backed up in 3 places, who could walk into a room that was falling apart and have it running smoothly in 20 minutes without raising her voice once. She was organized the way other people are talented naturally, almost effortlessly, with a kind of quiet joy in the doing of it. She liked order, she liked systems. She liked the particular satisfaction of a plan that worked the way it was supposed to work. She also laughed easily, freely, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere real, loud enough to fill a room, warm enough to make strangers feel like they had known her for years. She had a dimple on the left side of her face that only appeared when she smiled fully, and it had a way of making people feel seen, like they had been given something. Her mother had always said that Chloe's smile was a gift she gave without knowing she was giving it. She had studied business administration and international communications at NYU, graduated in the top 5% of her class, and spent 3 years working for a corporate consulting firm in Manhattan, where she had learned to coordinate high-stakes deliverables, manage difficult personalities, and function at a level of professional precision that made her very good and very sought after. She had applied for the executive assistant position at Shin Group Holdings in Seoul on something between an impulse and a prayer. The contract was exceptional, the opportunity was extraordinary, and some part of her had wanted for a long time to live somewhere that was not the same skyline she had always known. She got the call on a Thursday afternoon. She accepted on Friday morning. She told her grandmother on Saturday over the phone, and her grandmother said, "Baby, go. The world is too wide to stay in one corner of it." She told her best friend Tasha on Saturday night over wine, and Tasha said, "Wait, Korea? Like K-drama Korea?" And Chloe said yes, and Tasha screamed loud enough to be heard by the neighbors. She arrived in Seoul on a gray Tuesday morning in November, with 2 large suitcases and a carry-on and a set of wireless earbuds, and a deeply organized spreadsheet of everything she needed to do before she started work in 4 days. She stood outside Incheon Airport in the cold morning air, watching the taxis and the city buses and the people moving with the particular focused energy of a city that never truly stops, and she felt something open in her chest. Not fear. Something closer to readiness. She was ready. She had absolutely no idea what she was walking into. The HR director at Shin Group Holdings was a woman named Park Ji-yeon. She was 43 years old, had been with the company for 15 years, and had the specific energy of a person who had seen too much to be surprised by anything, but had also retained, somehow, a fundamental warmth toward other human beings. She dressed well, she spoke excellent English. She had a small succulent on her desk named Gerald, and she talked to Gerald sometimes when she was stressed, which in this building was frequently. She met Chloe on her first official morning with a firm handshake and a thorough orientation packet that covered everything from the dress code to the building security protocols to the company's internal communication system. She walked Chloe through the 23rd floor, the executive floor, all clean lines and dark wood and the kind of hushed, pressurized quiet that expensive buildings have, and explained the layout, the key contacts, the procedures for handling correspondence and scheduling and travel. She was thorough, she was professional, she covered everything. And then, just before she walked Chloe to her desk, the large, beautifully equipped desk directly outside the CEO's office, she paused. She turned. She looked at Chloe with an expression that Chloe would later describe to Tasha as the look a person gives you right before they tell you the theme park ride you're about to get on has a complicated history. Our CEO, Jiyeon said carefully, has a very particular management style. Chloe nodded. I've worked for difficult people before. Jiyeon looked at her. She looked at Gerald briefly across the room. She looked back at Chloe. Of course, she said. Welcome to Shin Group. If you need anything at all, my door is always open. She said it the way a person says something they genuinely mean but also know will not be enough. Chloe sat at her new desk, opened her planner, and began preparing for the morning. His name was Baek Ryujin, 32 years old, CEO of Shin Group Holdings, a conglomerate with interests in technology, infrastructure, real estate, and several other sectors that were listed in the annual report and several more that were not. He had inherited the leadership of both the company and the organization beneath it at 27, following the death of his father. And in 5 years he had expanded the former and refined the latter into something that ran with the silent, precise efficiency of a machine that had been engineered by someone who did not tolerate error. He was tall, 6'1", maybe 2. He had dark eyes that were sharp without being aggressive, the kind of eyes that took in a room completely before they settled on anything specific. His face, in its natural state, communicated nothing in particular, which was itself a form of communication that most people found extremely unsettling. He had a jaw that looked like it had been drawn by someone who took geometry seriously, and he wore his dark hair pushed back from his forehead in a way that was precise without appearing to be. His suits were always perfect, always dark, always fitted, always conveying the particular message that this was a man who understood that appearance was a form of authority. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He had a way of speaking, quiet, direct, stripped of every unnecessary syllable that made rooms go still. He spoke in full sentences when the occasion warranted them and in single words when they would do. He shook hands once and firmly, and he did not make small talk. He ran his meetings on schedule and ended them when he had what he needed, regardless of whether anyone else in the room felt finished. He smiled approximately never. His staff feared him in the particular way that people fear something that is not irrational. Not the fear of a bully, not the fear of someone unpredictable and volatile, but the measured, logical fear of a man who was always watching, always calculating, and who had a way of knowing things he should not have known and responding to them in ways that were quietly, effectively devastating. He was fair in the way that a very cold winter is fair. It treats everyone the same, regardless of how they feel about it. He had had 4 executive assistants before Chloe. The story of each one had become, in the quiet culture of the 23rd floor, a kind of legend told in fragments and lowered voices. The first assistant had been a woman named Song Hye-in, who had lasted 2 weeks. Nobody knew exactly what had happened in those 2 weeks because Hye-in had, following her departure, moved to Jeju Island and apparently declined to discuss her time at Shin Group with anyone. People who had known her said she seemed fine but had developed a mild aversion to dark suits. The second had been a man named Cho Tae-won, who had made it 3 weeks before appearing in Jiyeon's office on a Wednesday afternoon and saying, in a voice that was very controlled but had something underneath it that wasn't, that he needed to be reassigned. He was reassigned. He was currently working in the DGN office where he was, by all reports, extremely happy and had not had a nightmare in months. The third was a woman named Lee Subin, who had been by far the most resilient and had lasted 4 months. She had been genuinely excellent at the job, and those 4 months had produced the most efficiently run version of the 23rd floor in recent memory. She had resigned via a letter that was 3 paragraphs long, professionally worded, and contained not a single specific complaint. Only a closing line that said, "I believe my skills are better suited to a different environment," which everyone understood to mean something very specific. The fourth was a man named James. He had been recruited from a firm in Singapore specifically, because the HR team had theorized that an international hire might bring a different kind of resilience. James had lasted 6 weeks, which was technically the record. He had resigned by email. He had, before resigning, blocked the company phone on his personal cell. He had also, Jeon had noted with a kind of exhausted professional respect, written the most thorough and organized handover document of any of the previous assistants, which suggested that even in his departure he was doing the job properly. All of this history was technically available if anyone wanted to find it. Chloe had done her research before arriving, but the information that made it into official documentation was limited. What she knew was that there had been a high turnover in the role. What she did not yet know was the texture of why. She would learn. She met Ryujin for the first time at 8:57 on a Tuesday morning. She had arrived at 7:30. In those first 87 minutes she had familiarized herself with the physical layout of the desk and filing system, cross-referenced the printed calendar with the digital one, and identified 3 scheduling inconsistencies which she had flagged and corrected. Prepared a briefing folder for the 9 o'clock meeting with tabs and summaries, and a 1-page overview clipped to the front. Learned the names and roles of the 3 people she would be interacting with most regularly on the floor. And made his coffee. Black, no sugar, she had researched this. The coffee went on the right side of the desk, 14 inches from the edge, because she had read the preference notes in the handover document that James, excellent, thorough James, had left behind. She was standing near her desk, reviewing the morning's communication log when the elevator opened. The floor changed when he walked in. That was the only way she could describe it later. Not dramatically, not like a movie. But something in the air adjusted, the way a room adjusts when someone opens a window. You feel it before you see the source of it. The junior staff at the far end of the floor who had been having a quiet conversation stopped having it. The woman who had been walking toward the printer chose to wait. Everyone recalibrated unconsciously and immediately to the fact of him. He walked in, briefcase in hand, scanning the floor with the particular efficiency of a man who processes information quickly and acts on it without pause. His eyes landed on Chloe. He stopped. Not for long, a beat, too, but he stopped. He looked at her the way she had noticed powerful people sometimes looked at new things, not with hostility, not with welcome, just with a complete and thorough taking in, like a security camera that had registered a new variable and was filing it accordingly. She did not look away. She met his eyes, gave him a small, professional smile and said, "Good morning, Mr. Baek, I'm Chloe Danvers. Your briefing folder is on your desk, coffee is ready, and your 9 o'clock is confirmed. Mr. Han from the development team is already in the conference room." A pause. "You moved the plant," he said. She blinked. She looked at the small potted plant on the corner of her desk, the one she had shifted 4 inches to the left to make room for her second monitor. "I can move it back," she said. "Fine where it is," he said. He looked at the plant once more, then walked past her into his office. 3 seconds later, from inside, "My coffee is on the wrong side of the desk." She walked to the doorway. The handover note said right side 14 inches from the edge. "Left side," he said. He did not look up from the briefing folder. 14 inches. She walked in. She moved the coffee from the right to the left. She walked back out. She sat at her desk. She opened her planner. She crossed out right side and wrote left side in neat, decisive letters. In her head, she said several things that she would not repeat in professional company. The first morning established the pattern. He called her in 7 times before noon. Each time the instruction was brief and precise. Each time she executed it completely and correctly and returned to her desk without comment. She was professional, she was calm. She was absolutely excellent at the logistics of this job and she knew it. What she was also doing on a parallel track that she kept entirely to herself was reading him. She read people the way she had been reading them since she was small, not with any mystical instinct, just with careful, sustained attention to detail. She noticed things. She noticed that he held his pen loosely when he was thinking and tightly when he had already decided something. She noticed that his jaw set in a very specific way, a slight leftward tension, when he was on a call that was irritating him. She noticed that he stood at the window for exactly 3 minutes after every major meeting, not moving, not on his phone, just standing, and she had a strong instinct that this was not nothing, that it was a kind of resetting, a ritual he had built into himself without naming it. She noticed that when he was reading something complex, he moved his thumb in a small, repetitive circle against the side of his pen, and that when he stopped doing it, he had reached a decision. She noticed that he was harder on himself than he was on anyone else in the room, which was saying something because he was quite hard on other people. She filed all of it. She did not use any of it yet. She simply knew it, the way you learn the layout of a building before you need to move through it quickly. At 1:15 in the afternoon, a courier arrived. Young kid, maybe 20 years old, with a wide, guileless face and a cap that sat slightly too far back on his head, giving him the look of someone who had dressed himself in the dark and found it worked out. He handed Chloe a sealed envelope, looked at her face, and said, in uncertain but enthusiastic English, "Beautiful smile, miss." Then he grinned, big, gap-toothed, entirely sincere, and walked back to the elevator. Chloe laughed. She could not help it. It was the sudden kind of laugh, the kind that arrives before you've decided to allow it, bright and real. The dimple came out fully. Behind her, Ryujin's office door was open by approximately 1 foot. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, she had been asked to reorganize the entire digital archive system, 4,000 folders, cross-filed under 3 different categorization systems, none of which were consistent with each other by end of week. Chloe looked at her screen, she looked at the archive. She picked up her coffee, took a long, slow sip, and said very quietly to the middle distance, "We've had worse, Brooklyn." She started on folder 1. 6 weeks passed. In those 6 weeks, Chloe established herself on the 23rd floor with a completeness that surprised even the people who had been there for years. She was good, genuinely, substantively good, at the work. Not just organized, but strategically organized. Not just responsive, but anticipatory. She could look at Ryujin's schedule 3 days out and identify the pressure points before they became problems. She could sense from the rhythm of his morning what kind of day it was going to be and adjust her communication style accordingly. She had rebuilt the archive system by end of week 2, having finished it 4 days early, and the new system was clean enough and intuitive enough that 2 of the senior analysts had come to her independently to ask if she could help them restructure their own team filing systems. She had also, in those 6 weeks, smiled at a lot of people. She did not think about this as a separate activity. It was simply part of how she moved through the world. She smiled at Mr. O, the security guard in the lobby, who had a bad knee that made the long morning shift hard and who lit up every time she greeted him. She smiled at the junior analysts who were young and clearly afraid of the building and needed the occasional reminder that they were allowed to be human beings while at work. She smiled at the woman at the lobby coffee cart. Her name was Mrs. Baek, and she had been running that cart for 11 years and had grandchildren and opinions about the weather. She smiled at the cleaning staff, at the couriers, at the visiting clients who looked nervous before meetings. She smiled because she was a person who smiled. It was reflexive. It was genuine. It was, as far as she was concerned, a completely neutral act. She did not understand for several weeks that it was being registered. The first thing she noticed was Han Bae-soo. Han Bae-soo was a junior associate on the 23rd floor, 24 years old, conscientious and helpful. The kind of young professional who showed up early and stayed late, and did every small task with a seriousness that suggested he was practicing to be a better version of himself. One day in Chloe's 3rd week, he had helped her carry a genuinely excessive stack of binders from the storage room to the conference room, refusing to let her take the heavier half, making a small joke in broken English about the binders possibly being alive. She had laughed and thanked him warmly. The thanks included the full smile, the dimple. Ryujin, passing the corridor at that exact moment, registered this with the particular complete attention he gave to most things. 5 days later, Han Bae-soo was reassigned to the finance team on the 22nd floor. The official reason given was restructuring. The timing was interesting. Chloe noted it. The second thing was the lawyer. At a contract review meeting in week 4, there was a visiting attorney from a firm called Yoon and Associates, a man in his mid-30s named Park Sung-woo who had the comfortable confidence of someone who was good at his job and knew it. He had made a mild joke during a break in the proceedings, something self-deprecating about contract language, and Chloe, seated near the door with her tablet, had smiled. Not directed at him specifically. Just the ambient, automatic response to something that was mildly funny. But it had been visible, and Park Sung-woo had registered it and smiled back. Ryujin, seated at the head of the table, had gone very still. Park Sung-woo attended 2 more meetings and then stopped coming. A junior colleague from his firm took over. The reason given was schedule conflicts. The timing was, again, interesting. The third incident, the one that really completed the picture for her, involved Mr. O. She had been in the lobby on a Thursday morning when Mr. O told her a story about his grandson, who had apparently, at age 4, attempted to eat an entire chili pepper on a dare from a neighbor's kid, and had reacted with such theatrical devastation that the whole family still called it the incident. The story was told with the loving, amused delivery of a grandfather who has told a story many times and still finds it funny. Chloe laughed. The real, full laugh, loud, unrestrained, bouncing off the lobby's marble floors and high ceilings. Mr. O beamed. It was a good moment. Ryujin was crossing the lobby toward the elevator at that exact moment. He looked at Mr. O. It was a brief look. But Mr. O, who had been on this floor for 6 years and had developed a finely tuned sensitivity to Ryujin's particular frequencies, felt it like a cold front moving through. He started wearing a thermal undershirt to work after that, even indoors. Chloe put it together slowly, then quickly, the way you solve a puzzle where the pieces seem unrelated until suddenly they don't. She went back through the weeks in her mind. She cross-referenced. She confirmed. And when the picture was complete, she sat at her desk and looked at Ryujin's closed office door and felt something that was a complicated mixture of disbelief, irritation, and a third thing she chose not to examine too closely at that time. Every single time, every person, every smile, something happened. She ran the conclusion she had reached past Tasha that Friday evening via FaceTime while eating leftover rice and stew at her kitchen counter. "So let me make sure I have this right," Tasha said. She was lying across her bed in Brooklyn with her hair wrapped, holding her phone above her face with the particular boneless energy of a woman on a Friday night with nowhere to be. "This man, this CEO, what does he look like first? Tasha, I need the full picture for analysis purposes." Chloe pointed her chopstick at the camera. "The point is, you didn't say he was ugly, so I'm working with information." "The point," Chloe said firmly, "is that every time I smile at somebody at work, that person ends up reassigned or rescheduled or switched to the night shift. And I have enough data points now to know it is not random." Tasha was quiet for a moment, which was unusual. "So he's jealous?" "He doesn't know me." "Chloe, jealousy doesn't require a deep personal history. Sometimes a man just sees a woman smile at another man and his whole brain just..." She made a small explosion gesture with her free hand. "I am his employee. And it's completely irrational, yes, problematic, debatable." "Interesting," Tasha raised an eyebrow. "Extremely." Chloe pointed the chopstick at the camera again. "I'm going to address it professionally." "I'm going to speak to him directly and clearly." "Right. This is a workplace issue and I intend to handle it as such." "Of course." Tasha's tone was the tone of a person who has known someone for 15 years and is fully aware that what she is being told is approximately 40% of the complete story. "And the fact that you keep bringing up how tall he is." Chloe ended the call. She sat at her kitchen counter for another few minutes. She ate her rice. She looked at the Seoul skyline through her window, all lit up and layered, a city stacked on itself, all those lives overlapping. She made a decision. The conversation happened on a Friday evening, 6 weeks and 4 days into her tenure. She had stayed late to finalize the logistics for a shareholder meeting the following Tuesday. It was the kind of work she liked, detailed, consequential, requiring the simultaneous management of multiple moving parts, each dependent on the others, all of which needed to arrive at the same destination at the same time without visible effort. She had confirmed the catering, the AV setup, the car arrangements for 8 attending board members, the room configuration, the printed materials, the digital backup, and the contingency plan for the 2 board members who were, historically, unable to agree on the room temperature. She was almost done. She had been alone on the floor for 2 hours or so, she thought, until she looked up and noticed the thin line of light still burning under Ryujin's office door. She finished what she was doing. She gathered the confirmation documents into a neat folder. She knocked once on his door and entered. He was standing at the window. Jacket off, tie loosened by exactly 1 button, sleeves rolled to the elbows in a way that felt like the absolute minimum concession to the lateness of the hour. The Seoul skyline was behind him, all of it, the towers and the bridges and the river and the lights, layers and layers of it. and he was looking out at it with the stillness of a man who was used to looking at things without being seen himself. He was, by any reasonable accounting, extremely difficult to look at and look away from. Chloe noted this and then deliberately declined to give it more attention than it warranted. "Everything is confirmed for Tuesday," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "The car count is final. Mr. Park from the Incheon team needed an extra vehicle for 2 additional delegates. I've arranged it and updated the confirmation sheet. The room configuration is set, catering is confirmed with the backup order placed, and I have a contingency brief for the temperature issue." She paused. "It's in the red tab." "Fine," he said. He did not turn from the window. She should have left. She had everything she came in to do. She had placed the folder, delivered the update, and the work portion of this interaction was complete. She did not leave. She stood there for a moment and felt the decision forming in her, not recklessly, not on impulse, but with the quiet, deliberate energy of a woman who has made up her mind about something and is simply choosing when to begin. Her grandmother's voice came to her the way it always did when she was about to do something that required nerve. "A closed mouth doesn't get fed, baby, and a closed mouth doesn't get answers either." "Can I ask you something?" she said. He turned slightly, not fully, enough to show the angle of his face, the jaw, the sharp line of his profile against the window light. "You can ask," he said. It wasn't permission exactly. It was more like an acknowledgement that the question existed. "Han Bayamsu," she said. A pause, nothing visible changed in him, but she felt the attention shift, focus, like a lens adjusting. "He was reassigned," Ryujin said. "I know. The official reason was restructuring. But he was very good at his job and everyone on the floor knew it, and the reassignment happened 5 days after he helped me carry binders to the conference room." She kept her voice level. "Informational, so I'm asking because I want to understand whether that was a coincidence." The silence that followed was the careful kind, the kind that is not absence but choice. "He was needed on a different team," Ryujin said. "Okay," she said. "And Park Sungwoo from Yoon and Associates?" The smallest tension, around the eyes, almost nothing, she caught it. "Scheduling conflict," he said. He attended the first 2 meetings without any scheduling issues and stopped coming after the third one, which was the meeting where I was in the room. She tilted her head slightly. Not accusatory, just precise. Mr. O's shift rotation changed as well. He was on days for 3 years and moved to nights 2 weeks ago. The silence this time was a different quality. It had weight in it, density. Ryujin turned from the window fully. He looked at her, and this look was different from the others. It was not the inventory-taking look of the first morning. It was not the flat, administrative look of their working interactions. It was something more direct, something that engaged with her as a person rather than as a variable. She felt it differently, and she did not entirely enjoy that she felt it differently, because it complicated the clean professional line she had been standing behind. "You have been keeping notes," he said. "I keep notes on everything," she said. "It's a personality trait." Something moved through his expression that was too quick and too contained to name. "Is there something you want to say, Miss Danvers?" he asked. "I want to understand if I have done something wrong," she said. "Professionally. If there is a policy I'm not aware of, a conduct standard, a cultural norm I haven't been briefed on, I want to know because I take this job seriously and I want to do it correctly." "Your work is not in question," he said. "Then I want to understand what is happening," she said. "Because the pattern I'm seeing suggests that when I smile at someone in this building, something consequential happens to that person." She paused. She held his gaze. "And I deserve to know why." The room held very still. The city moved behind him, lights, traffic, the distant sound of Seoul being itself, and inside this office everything was suspended. Ryujin said nothing for a long moment. He looked at her with that direct, unreadable look. She held it. She did not fill the silence with softening language or apologetic qualifications. She had asked the question. She was willing to wait for the answer. What she had not expected was that the not answering would itself be an answer. That the particular quality of the silence, not dismissive, not cold, but something that had an almost physical pressure to it, like something large and heavy held in check, would tell her, wordlessly and with complete clarity, something she was not entirely prepared to know. She looked at him. She tilted her head very slightly to one side, the way she did when she was completing a picture, and something clicked. Quietly, softly, the sound of understanding arriving. She picked up her bag from where she had set it near the door. "Good night, Mr. Baek," she said. Her voice was calm, warm, even like she was giving him room for something. She left. He stood in his office. He looked at the folder on his desk. He looked at the door. He sat down. He picked up his pen. He set it down. He looked at the window. He stayed in that office for another hour and a half, and the work he was supposed to be doing during that time did not get done. The following week was a new kind of interesting. Chloe came in Monday morning with a plan, not a confrontational plan, a scientific one. She had decided that if her smiling at people was the variable that was generating this response, she would change the variable and observe the results. She would not smile at anyone inside the building. Not because she was intimidated into it, she was very clear with herself on this point. She was running an experiment, but because she wanted data. She wanted to see what he did when the thing he was apparently reacting to was removed. This was, she acknowledged to herself in her 14th floor bathroom mirror on Monday morning while applying her edges, a slightly unhinged way to handle a workplace situation. She also acknowledged that she was genuinely curious, in a way that had nothing to do with professionalism, about what she was going to find out. So she went in. She did her job, which she did magnificently as always. She responded to emails and managed communications and prepared materials and coordinated meetings. She spoke to people warmly and professionally. She was not going to be cold, that wasn't who she was, but she kept the full smile in her pocket. The dimple stayed home. She watched Ryujin all week without appearing to watch him. He was different. Not dramatically, he was never dramatic, that wasn't in his register. But the particular undertow of tension that usually ran just below his controlled surface was reduced. He was the same cold precision, the same crisp authority, the same brief language and still efficiency. But the set of his shoulders was fractionally different. The way he occupied his office had a slightly different quality. Like a man who had been bracing for something and noticed, with a complicated feeling, that the thing was not coming. On Wednesday, she caught him watching her. She was reviewing a document at her desk, and she looked up instinctively, the way you look up when you feel eyes on you, and he was standing in his office doorway with a file in his hand, looking at her. Not doing anything with the looking, just looking, like a person who had been watching something move for a while and had not quite finished watching. He looked away first. He went back inside. He pulled the door to. She looked at her screen. She pressed her lips together to prevent the smile that was trying to happen. She had her data. On Thursday she started smiling at him, not the full smile, just the edges of it. A small, contained warmth, present in her face when she handed him his coffee or when she passed him a document or when their eyes met in the course of the workday's ordinary traffic. Small, quiet, intentional. Like a signal sent on a frequency that only certain equipment could receive. He never smiled back, but he stopped cutting the eye contact as quickly as he usually did. He let it sit for a moment, 2 moments, before he looked away. He did not acknowledge what she was doing with any words. But there was a change in the room, the particular change that happens between two people when something unspoken is being slowly, carefully negotiated in a language that neither of them has officially agreed to be speaking. Chloe filed it away. She did not push. She was patient in the way that people are patient when they understand that some things need to come to their own temperature before they can be touched. On Friday afternoon, something happened that had nothing to do with smiling and everything to do with the other side of who Baek Ryujin was. She had known, in a general way, that there was more to this company than what appeared in the public record. She was not naive and she was not without context. The corporate world she had worked in before had its own shades of gray, and she had grown up in a neighborhood that had taught her early that institutions were not always what their front faces presented. She had noticed things at Shin Group from early on. The men who arrived via the private elevator on irregular schedules, men with certain postures and certain eyes and watches that cost more than cars. The sealed files she was occasionally asked to handle but never to open. The calls that happened in Ryujin's office after hours in a register she could not hear clearly through the walls. She had registered all of it and made the professional calculation, quite consciously, to do her job to the absolute best of her ability and to ask no questions she was not supposed to ask. That Friday she was doing exactly this at her desk after 7, finishing the week's communication logs, when the private elevator opened and 2 men stepped onto the floor. She did not know these men, but she knew the type. She had grown up around enough different kinds of power to recognize the flavor of this specific variety. Controlled, lateral, the kind that did not need to announce itself. They went directly to Ryujin's office and knocked once, and he admitted them, and the door closed. She worked. She kept her face toward her screen. She was very still and very quiet, the way she had learned to be in certain rooms, the particular quality of invisible that meant. I am not a threat, I am not a target, I am simply furniture, proceed as though I am not here. The voices inside the office were low. She could not hear words clearly, only register and rhythm. And then, through the wall, she heard three things. Her name, then a different voice lower, then Ryujin's voice, the quietest of the three and completely flat, with the particular flatness of someone who has made a statement that they have no interest in repeating. She stays. A pause. She is under my protection. That is the end of this conversation. More silence. Then the sound of the meeting ending, chairs, brief footsteps, the door opening. The two men came out. They walked past her desk without looking at her directly, but she felt them clock her in their peripheral vision, the way people clock things they have been told to leave alone. They left. She kept her eyes on her screen. After a minute, she heard Ryujin's footsteps. The door opened fully. She looked up. He was standing in the doorway, jacket back on, looking at her with an expression that was doing something she had not seen it do before. Not entirely flat. Something working in the eyes. You can go, he said. It's late. I'm almost done, she said. Chloe? He said her name like it was a decision he had made about something. She looked at him for a moment. Then she saved her work, gathered her things, and stood up. Good night, Mr. Baek, she said. Something in him shifted, very small. Good night, he said, and then, a beat later, almost to himself. Lock your building entrance when you get home. She paused. She looked at him. She nodded once slowly and left. She went home and sat in her bathtub for 50 minutes and stared at the ceiling and thought about a man who said she stays in a tone that had not been professional, not even a little bit, and who had then told her to lock her building entrance in the same voice a person uses to say something they cannot otherwise say. She called Tasha. Hello, he said. I'm under his protection. A pause on the other end of the line. Tasha, I'm sorry, I'm processing. Process faster. Chloe, baby. He is gone for you. He is my employer. He is gone. I live in a country where I know 12 people and one of them is actively rearranging his entire corporate staff because of my facial expressions. That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard. Tasha, that is not. No, listen. In K-drama language, that is a declaration. Chloe pressed her fingers to her eyes. I need you to be rational right now. I am being completely rational. A powerful man is using his considerable resources to keep other men away from you. That is K-drama episode 3 behavior. You are in a K-drama, Chloe. I am in a bathtub in Gangnam having a crisis. A crisis in a very nice bathtub in Seoul. This is not a bad situation. Chloe ended the call. She lay in the water and looked at the ceiling. She thought about dark suits and still offices and a voice through a wall saying she stays with the absolute finality of something already decided. She thought about small, quiet smiles directed at her and then quickly looked away from. She thought about a man who seemed to have exactly one setting, cold, controlled, terrifyingly competent, but who had in the last several weeks shown her fragments of something that did not fit that setting at all. She thought for a long time. She admitted to herself in the privacy of her $50 Gangnam bathtub, in some trouble. The charity gala was held on the first Saturday of December at the Grand Hyatt in 81. It was a formal event, an annual affair on Seoul's social calendar, attended by the heads of major corporations, investors, political figures, and the particular category of person who was invited to everything important because they were important everywhere. Chloe had coordinated Shin Group's attendance with the precision she applied to everything. Table arrangements confirmed, seating cross-referenced against the guest list for any potential conflicts, Ryujin's evening schedule mapped to the minute, transportation arranged, dietary restrictions communicated to the catering team 3 days in advance. She had planned to attend in a logistics capacity. Earpiece in, tablet ready, stationed at a discreet remove from the main tables and available as needed. She had been to events like this in her Manhattan days in exactly this role, and she knew how to be present without being visible, how to manage from the edges without disrupting the surface. She had not given much thought to what she would wear. She was going to be working. She chose her outfit practically, something polished and professional but not conspicuous, the kind of thing you wear when your goal is to be competent rather than noticed. And then, 3 days before the event, a garment bag arrived at her apartment with a note from Jiyeon's assistant. HR has arranged formal attire for attending staff. If the enclosed is acceptable, please confirm. Alterations can be arranged. She opened the bag. The dress was deep burgundy, not red, not wine, but the specific shade that sits right between them and makes both look insufficient. It was off the shoulder with a fitted bodice and a skirt that moved. It was the most beautiful piece of clothing Chloe had seen in recent memory, and it fit, when she tried it on, like someone had measured her without her knowing, which she thought was entirely possible in this building. She confirmed the dress. She arranged her hair herself, a textured updo with a few locks left down to frame her face. She wore the gold earrings her mother had given her when she graduated. She arrived at the Grand Hyatt 40 minutes early, tablet in hand, and stood near the entrance reviewing her logistics notes in the pre-event quiet. She was not thinking about how she looked. She was thinking about the seating chart and the 2 board members who historically could not agree on anything. She heard the change in the lobby before she saw it. The particular shift, the sound of a room recalibrating that she had come to associate with one person. She looked up. He was crossing the hotel lobby in a black tuxedo that fit the way his suits always fit, like it had been built for him specifically, which it had. He was moving through the arriving guests with the unhurried authority of a man for whom rooms are always arranged in advance. His face was composed, giving nothing, the stone precision of a man performing sociability with enormous skill and minimal enthusiasm. And then he saw her. He did not stop. He did not stumble. He was not a man who stumbled. But there was something, a fractional pause, a slight shift in the way he was moving, like a man who has looked at something and had to make a conscious decision to continue walking in the direction he was walking. It was very small. It was also completely visible to anyone who knew how to look at him, and she knew how to look at him. He crossed to her. The table arrangement for table 7 needs to be revised, he said. Hwang needs to be moved. I moved him to table 4 this afternoon, she said. His assistant called at 3. He looked at her for a moment that lasted slightly longer than a logistics update required. You're wearing gold, he said. She looked at him. I am, she said. Gold catches the light. She tilted her head. Is that a problem? A pause. No, he said. He looked at the room over her shoulder. He looked back at her. He said nothing else. He moved into the gala. She stood there for a moment. Gold catches the light. She turned the phrase over. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't a complaint. It was an observation, specific, personal, unnecessary, from a man who communicated in the fewest possible syllables and had chosen to use several of them to tell her that he had noticed her earrings. She tucked it into her pocket with the other things. The evening moved. Chloe worked it as she always worked events, efficiently, invisibly, with the quiet command of someone who knows where everything is and ensures that nothing needs to be found because she has already placed it correctly. The gala was smooth. The room looked beautiful. The important people said important things to each other in the specific language of people who have been important for a long time and know how to perform it for rooms full of other important people. Ryujin worked the room with the practiced cold competence she had observed across multiple settings now, handshakes, brief substantive exchanges, the targeted conversations of a man who had an agenda for every interaction and executed it without excess. He did not linger, he did not laugh. He moved through the room the way he moved through everything, like a decision that had already been made. She watched him when she had a moment. She watched him the way you watch someone from a distance when you have started to understand them, not looking for anything specific, just watching the fullness of a person in motion. She noticed the way he positioned himself in the room, always near an exit, always with sight lines to the door. She noticed the way he listened, completely, with his whole face, even when he appeared to be only partially engaged. She noticed that he touched his left cufflink when he was in a conversation he wanted to exit, a small, private signal she doubted anyone else had clocked. She noticed all of it and thought, for the first time clearly and without qualifier, that she found him genuinely, deeply interesting. Not the way you find a puzzle interesting, though there was that. The way you find a person interesting, the whole complicated, difficult, layered person, the stone surface and what she was increasingly sure lived underneath it. She was cataloging all of this, standing near the back of the room with her tablet held lightly in one hand when someone spoke to her. "Excuse me, you're with Shin Group, aren't you?" She turned. Kim Young-hoon. She placed him immediately from her event research media investment, founding partner of KJH Capital, mid-30s, photograph on the company website that was clearly several years old. In person he was tall and easy-looking, with the comfortable sociability of a man who spent a lot of time in rooms like this and had learned to move through them naturally. "That's right," she said. "Chloe Danvers, executive assistant to Mr. Baek." "Kim Young-hoon," he said, "KJH Capital." He offered his hand and she shook it. "I have to say your English accent is wonderful. I didn't expect. Are you American?" "Brooklyn," she said. He smiled. "I studied in New York for 2 years, Columbia. I loved that city." He had the eager, genuine energy of someone who has found an unexpected point of connection. "How long have you been in Seoul?" "About 3 months now." "And how are you finding it?" They talked. It was easy and warm and entirely collegial. He asked about her impressions of the city, she asked about his background. They found 2 or 3 genuine points of common interest in the conversation. He was charming in a clean, uncomplicated way. She found herself relaxing slightly from the professional mode and enjoying the conversation like a normal human being at a party. She laughed at something he said, a genuine laugh, not the full volume one, but real enough. She did not see it happen. 20 feet away, Baek Ryujin went completely still. He was in the middle of a conversation with a board member and he did not abandon it. He was not a man who showed his hand through behavior, ever. But the quality of his attention fractured, one part of it leaving the conversation and going to the corner of the room where Chloe was standing and staying there with an absolute, fixed intensity that had nothing to do with logistics. She was still talking with Young-hoon when Young-hoon asked for her card, professionally, clearly, but with the slight warmth of someone who would not have minded if the request was received as something more. She was reaching for her tablet to note his contact details when she felt it. The change in the air. She had come to know it over 3 months, had mapped it, could now feel it before she looked. The particular density that entered a room when he entered, a specific quality of it, the focused, directed one, the one where his attention had narrowed and arrived. He was at her elbow. He had approached without hurry, without visible purpose, without anything in his manner that declared itself. He was simply there, standing close enough that she was immediately aware of his height, of the warmth that came off him despite the cold efficiency of his surface. "I need you," he said. It was addressed to her, but the register of it, the quality of the eye contact that tracked briefly to Young-hoon and then returned, contained a conversation that had nothing to do with his stated need and everything to do with the particular, unspoken, unreasonable thing that had been building in the space between them for 3 months. Young-hoon read it with the quick social intelligence of a man who had been in enough rooms to know what a territorial signal looked like, even a very controlled one. "It was lovely to meet you," he said to Chloe. He offered a pleasant nod to Ryujin. He excused himself. Chloe turned to face Ryujin. She looked up at him. He had 6 inches on her, more in her heels, and standing this close he was an entire weather system, and said steadily, "What do you need?" He looked at the space above her head. He looked at the floor. Both of these micro-movements were completely unlike him, and she registered them with the care she gave to everything she observed about him. He was searching for something. Words, she thought. He was looking for words to contain something that did not particularly want to be contained. "Table 12, he said. "Water placement?" She looked at him. He held the look. "The water placement," she repeated. "Yes, on table 12. Correct. And you came specifically to tell me about the water on table 12. A pause, then flat and final. "You are my executive assistant." She took a slow breath. She looked at the room behind him, at the beautiful, impossible, expensive gala unfolding across a hotel ballroom in a city that was not hers, at the city outside the windows, at Seoul at night, all of it improbably real. She made a decision, the same way she had made the decision in his office all those weeks ago. Not rashly, not emotionally, but with the quiet, deliberate weight of someone who has gathered enough information and has decided it is time. "Walk with me," she said. They crossed the room together at a professional distance to the window side of the hall where the music was faint and the space was quiet and the city spread out below them, all lit up like a conversation between light and glass. She turned to face him. I need to say something to you, she said, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. He looked at her. He said nothing, which she took as consent. For 3 months, she said, I have watched you remove people from my orbit every time I smiled at them. I have watched you manage a radius around me like you were guarding something. And I noticed, and I tried to understand it professionally, and then I understood it in a different way, and I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't fully know what to do with it. She paused. She kept her voice level, warm but precise. But I do know that what happened just now with Jung-hoon was not about water placement, and I think we are past the point where we are pretending otherwise. He did not answer immediately. He was looking at her with the full, direct attention that he gave to very few things, and it was considerable, like being held in a beam of something. She held it. She had long since established, not a woman who looked away from things. When he spoke, it was quiet, lower than usual. Something had come slightly undone in the controlled register. I don't like it, he said. You've said that before, she said. I need more than that. He looked at the window. The city was patient below them. When he looked back at her, something in his face had moved, not collapsed, not dramatic, but the stone had shifted slightly, and what was underneath it was simpler and less defended, and she thought truer. When you smile, he said, and he stopped. He tried again. When you smile at someone, I know it is who you are. I know it is not intended as anything more than kindness. I am aware that it is irrational. He said this with the particular frustration of a very rational man confronting something that has declined to behave rationally. But I have been aware of you in a way that is not professional, for longer than I am comfortable acknowledging. The gala continued around them. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed across the room. The city glittered on the other side of the glass, completely indifferent and beautiful. And that awareness, he continued, with the slow, careful delivery of a man navigating terrain he has never navigated before, makes it difficult to see you give that thing, that warmth to other people, freely, easily. To people who have not, he stopped again, he looked at the window, he came back. To people who have not spent 3 months trying to deserve it. The room was very quiet in the particular place where they were standing. Chloe looked at him for a long time. She felt something moving in her chest, not the giddy flutter of an ordinary moment, but something deeper and warmer, the specific feeling of something real landing, the recognition of sincerity in its rawest, least elegant, most genuine form. You've been trying to deserve it, she said softly. He looked like a man who had said more than he intended and was now reviewing whether this had been an error. I said it was irrational, he said. I heard you, she said. I don't think it's irrational, she paused. I think it's the most honest thing you've said to me in 3 months. Something crossed his face then that she felt like a weather change. The stone didn't fall away, it was too much a part of him for that, too deep, too long built, but it thinned. A light came through it, like the difference between a wall and a window. I don't know how to do this, he said. The admission was stark, plainly given, no decoration around it. I know, she said. That's been fairly obvious. A pause, and then there it was. Small, barely there, but undeniable and real and worth every moment of the 3 months she had spent in this building. The corner of his mouth moved. Slowly, like something that had not been used in a long time, remembering how. He smiled. It lasted about 4 seconds. It was not a big smile. She did not think Baek Ryujin had ever in his adult life produced a big smile, but it was completely, entirely, bone-deep real. She felt it in every part of herself. There it is, she said. She said it softly, like she was speaking about something she had been waiting for without knowing she was waiting. I've been waiting for that. Don't make it a thing, he said. The slight roughness in his voice was something she recognized from earlier conversations. The voice of a man maintaining composure through force of habit rather than because he was actually composed. It's already a thing, she said. It was already a thing some time ago? He looked at her. The look was open in a way she had not seen from him before, not the taking-in look, not the calculating look, not the still, strategic assessment, just present with her. In this specific corner of this specific room on this specific night in Seoul, with all of his considerable self, unguarded for the first time. The man from KJH Capital, he said. Jung-hoon, she said. He was, I know who he is, she said, and I am standing here with you. He was silent for a moment. Then, you're not afraid of me? I am, she said honestly. A little, you're quite a lot, Ryujin. But being afraid of something doesn't mean you run from it. He absorbed this. He looked at her with the full weight of his attention, and she let it settle, did not flinch from it, stood in it the way you stand in strong weather, not because it doesn't affect you, but because you have decided to remain. I am not, he began. He paused. He chose his words with the care of a man who does not have much practice with the kind of words he was trying to use. I am not easy to be near. I've noticed that, she said. I am not, he tried again, and something in the effort of it, the visible earnest difficulty of a man trying to communicate something outside his native register, made her chest ache in the best possible way. I am not good at the things that this requires. I know, she said gently. I also know that you have been learning my coffee preference and tracking my smile for 3 months, which means you are better at it than you think. You're just out of practice? He looked at her. She looked back. Outside the window, Seoul continued doing what Seoul does. It moved, it lit up, it breathed, it held all its millions of lives in its enormous complicated hands. Inside this corner of the Grand Hyatt, on a December night, something that had been building across 3 months of coffee temperatures and archive folders and second-hand smiles, and a voice through a wall saying she stays, arrived. Not with ceremony, not with drama, simply with the particular quiet permanence of something that was ready to exist. Chloe, he said. Her name in his mouth, without the distance of the title, without the professional remove, it felt like something being offered. Ryujin, she said. His name in her mouth, with the warmth she had been giving to everything else for 3 months and had been, she now understood, saving some of for him. They stood there together, not touching, not needing to. With the city behind them and the evening around them and the beginning, warm, improbable, entirely real, of something that neither of them had entirely planned for and both of them, in this moment, were choosing. The car ride back to Gangnam was quiet. He had offered her the ride home in the same way he did most things, briefly, without explanation, in the tone of someone stating a fact rather than asking a question. I'll have you dropped, he said. She had said, okay, and they had gotten into the back of the car together and the driver had pulled smoothly into the Seoul night and neither of them had said anything for several minutes. But the silence was different from the silences she had sat in before. It was not the careful silence of two people maintaining professional distance. It was the particular, gentle silence of two people who have said something true to each other and are now carrying it together, neither wanting to set it down just yet. The city moved past the windows. Han River on the right, all of it lit in gold and silver, the bridges strung like necklaces across the water. She watched it without speaking. He was quiet on his side of the back seat. They were not touching, there was appropriate space between them, but the space had changed. It was no longer the space of distance. It was the space of two people choosing how close to be. His phone buzzed. He took it from his pocket, looked at the screen, and set it face down on the seat beside him. She glanced at it, glanced at him. It can wait, he said. She smiled, not at him directly. Just the ambient warmth of it present in the air of the car. In her peripheral vision she saw him look at her face. She kept her eyes on the river. She let him look. After a moment he looked away too, out his window. But the corner of his mouth, the very corner, barely perceptible, shifted. She caught it. She filed it away with great and specific care. The next morning she arrived at 7:30 as always. She set her bag at her desk. She went to put on the kettle and she stopped. His coffee was already made. It was sitting on her desk, on the left side, 14 inches from the edge. Perfect? She stared at it. She looked at his office door, which was closed. She looked at the coffee again. She picked it up and took a sip. It was the correct temperature, not the politely acceptable temperature of something made and then allowed to sit, but the specific temperature of something made precisely when it was supposed to be made, right when she would want it. The ratio was right. Everything about it was right, and it was right in the specific way that she made it for herself, alone in her kitchen in Gangnam where no one could see. She sat down very slowly. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message. The coffee is on the correct side of the desk. She stared at her screen. She looked at his door. She put the phone down. She picked it back up. She read the message again as if the second reading might change what it said. It did not change what it said. It was still 7 words, and it was still, somehow, the most personally significant 7 words that had been sent to her phone in recent memory, which said something about the trajectory of her life in this city and in this building. She thought about a man who had, at some point in the time since she arrived, learned exactly how she took her coffee. Who had, without being asked, made it for her this morning. Who had then, because he was Baek Ryujin and Baek Ryujin did not give things without a small layer of armor over the giving of them, sent a message in the deadpan language of office logistics to deliver what was, if you knew how to read it, something else entirely. She understood the language now. She had always been good with languages. She laughed, she couldn't help it. It started small and then it grew bright, full, entirely free, filling the floor the way her laugh always filled spaces, bouncing off the dark wood and the high ceilings and the expensive professional quiet of the 23rd floor of Shin Group Holdings on a Monday morning in December. The laugh of a woman who has figured out that the most difficult, most guarded, most professionally terrifying man she has ever met has been quietly, carefully, privately learning her, the temperature of her coffee, the orientation of her workspace, the exact frequency of a smile she gave freely to a world that had done nothing yet to deserve it from him, and has decided, without announcement, without the vocabulary for the tenderness of it, to begin. Inside the closed office, Baek Ryujin sat at his desk. He had heard the laugh the moment it began. He set his pen down. He did not look up from his desk. He did not move. But something in his chest, something that had been cold for a very long time, cold in the way that buildings are cold when nobody has lived in them, cold with the practiced emptiness of a man who had made a decision somewhere in his 20s that closeness was a variable he could not afford, settled. It settled like warmth settling into something that has been cold. It settled like a decision being made quietly in the privacy of a chest that had been a closed room for years. It settled like a beginning. This, between them, was not an ending. Nothing about what had grown between Chloe Danvers and Baek Ryujin, between a woman who gave her warmth freely and a man who had only just started to learn to receive it, was finished. There were things still unknown between them, distances still to be crossed. His world was what it was, complicated and layered and not entirely safe, and she was still a woman 6,000 miles from Brooklyn who had walked into a building and changed everything by simply being who she was. There were conversations still to be had, and difficulties still ahead, and all the ordinary and extraordinary work of two people learning to be near each other across every distance that existed between them. But the beginning had begun. And in every story that ever mattered, that is where everything starts. If this story reached you, and I know it did, I need you to come to the comments right now and tell me, what was the moment that got you? Was it the coffee? Was it she stays? Was it him learning her whole soul through a closed office door for 3 months? I want to know, drop it below. I read every single comment, everyone. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell so you never miss us. Share this with someone who needs a story today, and come back because we have so many more where this came from. This family is just getting started. I will see you in the next one.